Hi, my name is Christy, and this is the American Chinese Food Show, where we analyze historical artifacts like vintage menus, recipe books, photographs, and text to tell the story of American Chinese food. In today's episode, we will continue talking about the influence of immigration policies and the waves of immigration that shaped the Chinese restaurant business, primarily in Canada in the 60s, 80s, and lastly, what's happening now. The Nationality Act of 1965 overturned the immigration quota system, allowing many more immigrants from Asia into the US and created temporary worker programs for skilled workers. The 1960s is when we first see a breath of fresh air in the Chinese restaurant business after decades of stagnation, as chefs from China, Hong Kong, Taiwan found new opportunities in North America. On top of seeing folks like Cecilia Chiang and Joyce Chan bringing northern Chinese food to San Francisco and Boston, we started seeing more diversity from regional Chinese cuisines like Sichuanese and Hunanese. One person in particular had a big influence in this wave, and he never even stepped foot in North America. His name is Chen Wing, Chen Wing, an elusive cooking instructor in Hong Kong. Not much is known about him except he is an avid recipe book writer with the most famous one called Cooking for 30 Years in 14 volumes. Chen also wrote the 3-volume Chinese Dim Sum, 4-volume Home Cooking, as well as the Encyclopedia of Han Cuisine published in 1951, with a specific focus on Cantonese food with 49 chapters on major topics like shark's fin, abalone, bird's nest. Included in it were 3 different ways to cook dogs. I read a bunch of his recipes and they're chock full of amazing tips, such as adding preserved salted lime on top of dried tangerine peel when you steam fish with fermented soybeans to add an extra layer of taste. So how did Chen Wing influence Chinese food in America? It was rumored every chef working in the industry had a copy of Cooking for 30 Years back in the days. He had a radio program that teaches people how to cook. It's customary for those who immigrated to North America to take his classes beforehand to equip themselves with some practical cooking skills in order to be able to land a job once they get to the new land. He even placed advertisements in the Xinhua Daily News, a Chinese newspaper in Canada, in 1959 to recruit new students. This one was very direct. The headline says, "If you want to make a lot of money, learn how to make tofu." On it also includes dishes students can learn: shrimp chips, beef jerky, spring roll skin, tofu full course. Another advertisement says, "Having $1 million is not as good as having one skill." Cantonese, Shanghainese, Beijingese, Sichuanese food, barbecue, braised dishes, dim sum, and pastries. It is believed Chen Wing's teaching popularized Hong Kong-style restaurants in North America, so we still see today things like fish tanks at restaurants so patrons can get their seafood as fresh as possible, and in the restaurant kitchen, skills like wok tossing and marinating with meat tenderizer. In the 80s and 90s, we saw yet another wave of Chinese, this time specifically from Hong Kong, immigrating to North America through the restaurant business. The Sino-British Joint Declaration is a treaty between the governments of the United Kingdom and China, signed in 1984, setting the conditions in which Hong Kong was transferred to Chinese control after July 1st of 1997. This was worrisome for many. Many people from Hong Kong took advantage of the Canadian government's offer to immigrate there if they had the resources to invest in a business. For those who didn't have the money to invest, they went through the Skilled Immigrant Express Entry program. The Canadian government has a points-based system to score a person's profile with skills, work experience, language ability, and others, and rank it in the Express Entry pool. Guess what? Chefs is considered a skilled job by the National Occupational Classification, along with doctors and restaurant managers. When I was growing up in Hong Kong in the early 90s, "Do you have enough points?" was actually a very common conversation and discussion among people. This scene from the 1995 Hong Kong movie Chinese Feast shows a bit how it works with the recruitment test for chefs to go work at a hotel in Toronto. From 1988 to 1993, 166,000 Hong Kong immigrants settled in Canada out of its 5 million population. 50% of these new citizens settled in Ontario and 27% in British Columbia. Today in Canada, more than 1 out of every 4 workers in the food and beverage sector are immigrants. Across the country, immigrants make up 53% of business owners with paid staff in the food and beverage sector. But the story doesn't end here. According to Principal Chen of Dixon Catering Institute, a cooking school in Hong Kong, during an interview, they are again seeing an increase of students trying to learn some skills to immigrate to another country since the wave we saw in the 80s and 90s. He said back in the days, people had to take 3 classes before they head out: Cantonese, food, dim sum, and barbecue. But as more and more Chinese people choose to live in a foreign country, they become a major clientele to Chinese restaurants outside of China too. So classes to learn Beijingese, Sichuanese food, and baos like xiaolong bao, pan-seared buns also became necessary. One student said, "I want to open a restaurant. I'm a Western-style chef by training. My first choice is Canada, if not the UK." Places change, people change, immigration policies change. What seems to remain the same is how the restaurant business is a gateway for many seeking for a better life. If you like our content, subscribe to our channel. See you soon.